All right, hello there. Because we received a generous gift from the congregation to buy some technology, this makes it possible now to make these videos and hopefully to address some of the questions you have as it relates to your faith. And what we're going to do is I'm going to make a different video for each question, and then we will find a way to reflect on them together to answer some of your other questions, and that will either be in person or somehow online. So the first question that I'm going to address will be popping up on the screen here in just a second. If he did so much to free us, then why does he make a life, and if you don't want to, you die? Or is he guiding us? And so I think, at least in the question, when we say he, we're talking about Jesus or God. And I mean, this is a great question, and I want to start by addressing a few things. First, as you noted, we talk about Jesus setting us free. So we need to talk about what do we mean by that. And of course, when the Bible talks about freedom, the Bible also talks about slavery, so we need to address those two things together. Also, as you noted, we need to talk about how that freedom relates to living, but also how that freedom relates to dying. So we need to talk about death and life, freedom and slavery, and then related to this last part of the question, we need to ask ourselves, is God done? Like God just does something and sits back, and then it's left up to us? Or does God accompany us? Is God with us on the way? And so what we're going to do is we're actually going to turn to the Bible to talk about this. We're going to turn to the church to talk about this. And hopefully we'll have at least the beginning of an answer for you. So when we talk about the Bible related to issues of freedom and slavery, of course, the place we can turn to is the book of Exodus. Now, the book of Exodus is the second book in your Bible, and you may recall it's about Moses. It's about Mount Sinai. But what it's really about is how the people go from being slaves to being free. And when they're slaves, they're Pharaoh's people, and that's not a very good place to be, but when they're free, they're God's people. And we might say the slavery they experience is a kind of mistake. They were not made to be slaves. They were made to be free. They were not made to be oppressed by Pharaoh. They were made to freely serve God. And so the reason it's called Exodus is because the word ex means out, and oudos means on the way or on the road. So it's the idea that God takes his people out on the road to change them from slaves and to make them free. Now, if you remember from the story, part of this freedom and slavery has to deal with death. And so as the question brings up death, so we bring it up too. Because if you remember from some of our classes, the death that happens, which finally sets the people free, is on Passover. And you'll remember the destroying angel comes, and the people are protected, and they're protected by the blood of the Lamb. Lamb's blood keeps them safe from death. And so once that happens, they go from Egypt, and we'll just say this is Egypt, and then God leads them to the promised land, and he does it by taking them through water. And when we talk about the church in a minute, we'll talk about how this journey is accomplished through water, not geographically, but through baptism. And this journey from slavery to freedom, from life to death to life again, happens in baptism. And in this case, we're not talking about going from the realm of Pharaoh, we're talking about the devil being freed to under the service of God. And that's what we mean in the church. But before we get to talking about the church, we need to address something else. And that is, God makes the people free, but the people don't want to be free, or they don't know how to live free. So when they're in the desert, having been made free, all they can think about is returning to the life of slavery. There's a kind of nostalgia. Wasn't the food great? Don't we miss it? The work was hard. But yes, we want to go back to Egypt and be slaves, which is insane. And yet one of the things we have to deal with when Jesus sets us free is oftentimes we miss the things that he set us free from. And so freedom is actually harder than slavery. Now, of course, the life of the slaves is difficult, as we know from the Bible, but from our own history. But when we talk about freeing the whole person, it's actually harder. It requires sacrifice, and it requires self-control. Because the truly free person is able to make a choice. If something is presented to them, they are not just a slave to their passions and their appetites, but they can choose, no, I will go this way instead of going that way. And so the life of freedom is harder. And so they miss being slaves. They miss it and they want to go back to it, and God has to show them how to live free. Now, if we talk about this in the church, this is the case too, that Jesus sets us free, this time not from Egypt, but he sets us free on the cross. And then you'll remember we have the empty tomb, and the empty tomb on Easter. I mean, this really represents the fullness of the Christian life, the cross and the tomb. And this represents freedom. Now, this freedom comes with obligations. It is not license, like, go do whatever you want, you can do anything. Rather, it is you are free now, and you are freed to follow. You are freed to follow God where he will lead. And this is the tricky part that actually gets to what you have to say here. Because when Jesus tells us to follow him, he doesn't say, hey everybody, I went to the cross, so you don't have to. No, he says, hey, follow me and pick up your own cross. Jesus sets us free, but he does not set us free by going around death. Rather, he sets us free by going straight up the middle, so that in fact he can free us from the inside out. You know, because when God sets the slaves free in the Exodus, it's kind of an outside freedom. Inside, they're still slaves. Outside, they're free. Inside, they're still slaves. And what Jesus wants to do is free us from the inside out. And the only way to do that is by going straight through death. Now, this is a hard thing for us to hear. Because when Jesus says, hey, everybody, follow me, and do it by taking up your cross, everyone who listens to him, for the most part, says, wait, what? And a lot of people tell him, no, I don't want to do that. Now, the strange thing is, you have to go this way no matter who you are, but we would rather deny it, or we would rather be distracted away from it, and so we often say, no, I cannot follow you there. Now, this is where Jesus, though, offers us the genius of his gift. And the genius of the gift, and I'm going to put that, genius of the gift, is that he doesn't avoid death. He's not afraid of it. Rather, he takes death captive. Death now becomes powerless. This is why, if you read your Bible, especially the New Testament, death is not described as death, it's described as sleep. And remember, dear friends, we're not just talking about bio-death, when your body stops working, but also spiritual death, that which would keep us from God and God's kingdom. And so Jesus breaks death. It's no longer powerful, and so Christianity describes death as a kind of sleep, because now we don't have to be afraid. And now, death is not extinction, but death is being woken up. This is an important point, so let me say that again. Death is not extinction. In the ancient world, the world of the Romans and the Greeks, they thought, well, you have one time around, and then you die, and that's it. You close your eyes, and reality disappears. You are extinct. In our own time, especially when people do not believe in God or speak very hard against belief in God, there's a similar fear that life, you go once around the planet and you're done, and that's it. You close your eyes and reality is no more. We might talk about it too as annihilation. See if I can spell that, annihilation. But no, that's not what Christianity's talking about, because Jesus has actually changed death. We talk about it as a kind of sleep from which we will be woken up. Waken up, woken up. This is what we talk about with resurrection. And in fact, one of your other questions is about body and spirit, which we'll get to, and we'll talk more about resurrection and what that means. Our souls, our bodies, and how we understand what those are. So, death changes. Now, this is what's so great about this question. You're right, we don't want to go this way. Jesus has set us free, and the way he's made for us is not attractive, but it is the way by which the world is redeemed. And so our own dying, and the dying of those whom we love, painful as it is, and we can acknowledge that, it's not fun, painful as it is, he has changed it. He has taken it captive. And now we can talk about hope. Hope is not optimism, where we say, well, I'm just going to look at it this way, and I'm going to choose to be positive. Hope is saying, no, there's something more. I know there's something more. And this something more is the promise of new life. What that finally means, and what that means here for the end of the question, is yes, Jesus guides us. Yes, Jesus guides us. The whole point of Jesus on the cross is that he goes to be with us in the place where we are utterly alone. He goes to the place of death so that we will not be alone. What this means is when the church talks about baptism, all of the imagery that I've described is in there. Baptism means that you are being connected to the cross of Jesus. You join him in communion. You are not alone. And you are given the promise of his life. He lived and you will live. And what it means is, God, I have to trust you. Not just with my brain, like, yes, God, I believe. But I trust you with my whole life. I trust you with my living. I trust you with my dying. I trust you with all that I am. And then all of that imagery of the Exodus means that through the water, we go from the place of death to the place of life, where God is our ruler. Now, we live in the world. Let's not pretend we don't live in the old world where all of that bad stuff happens. But the promise is, because we've passed through the water, our real home is here. This is where we belong with God, and then this is how we live. The shape of the Christian life, the ethics of the Christian life are dictated by where we belong and not where we currently live. The place of life versus the place of death. Well, I hope that's at least a beginning, and we'll see if this video works out, and we'll see if this addresses a little bit of what was being asked, and we'll look forward to asking some more questions in the days ahead. And so thank you very much for asking this, and I look forward to hearing more from you in the days ahead.